We have a lot of newbies. Excellent. Well, this program is called Pleasure Ed, and we offer free sex ed programming every week. So let everyone know about it. We're the only store in the country actually that offers free sex ed, so we're pretty proud of our program. We've been doing Pleasure Ed now for almost 11 years. And we do have some upcoming classes that are pretty awesome. This Friday, we do periodic happy hours, and we are doing an exclusive launch on a really awesome butt plug. So that'll be this Friday, free drinks and education. Then on Sunday, we have our intimate partner yoga class from 11 to 1 with Miyoko. So that's acro yoga. It's really fun. You bring your yoga mats and take over the store. And then I think it's Monday that Midori is here doing a crafting and kink event from 8 to 10. And then next Wednesday is Suck It, Lick It, Love It, which is our oral sex class. Woo! So if you fill out a feedback form tonight and give us your email, we will email you our events and any promotions that we offer. And also you get 15% off your purchase. So please fill out those feedback forms. And also, we are in the midst of programming for the next quarter. So if you let us know which classes you're interested in seeing, then we do really take that feedback into account when we're putting together our next round of classes. So I am Sarah, and this is Mary. And, well, I'll let you do your intro.
Oh, I'm Mary. I was a dom for the first 10 years of my adult life, and I've been a kinky person probably my whole life. I worked here and still work here, a lot of different jobs, and I've been teaching here for probably 8 or 9 years. So a little bit of cred when it comes to kinky stuff, and the main thing with me is like I just feel so excited about just having the opportunity to have a sexuality and then be able to explore it. So it's always a great honor for me to be able to impart any knowledge, kinky or otherwise, about sexuality. So I'm excited to be here.
And I'm Sarah. I started the education program here, so I've been teaching as part of it since the beginning. And I'm head of business at the Pleasure Chest, running the national operations. And this class, you know, Mary and I worked together for a long time, and so we have lots of conversations about sex and kink, and we were just talking about how really our identities have grown and changed so much over the years personally, but also what we then bring to our kink dynamics really change, and a lot of things that we used to rely on don't serve us anymore, right? And so I am, semi-recently in the last few years out of a vanilla marriage where I left my kinky side behind for a long time, and then sort of coming back into that identity and into like play and the community after so many years was really like an interesting like adjustment period for me to be like, oh, where is my kink at now? And so this class is really sort of stems from that place of like, even if you're totally new to DS dynamics or fetishy kind of play, or if you're somebody who's been playing for a long time, this class is really about trying to find dynamics that are authentic to you, and not necessarily like what you've seen or what you're told because of your identity is how you're supposed to play. And we're going to go over kind of like lots of different ways that you can really kind of root into play that is more meaningful and has a lot of depth to it once you really can identify like what you're trying to get out of it and what you're wanting to bring to it. So that's kind of where this class came from. A couple other just little announcements as far as the space. The chairs are as comfortable as it's gonna get with our space restrictions. So please get up and stretch, move around, take care of yourselves. We understand they're not very comfortable. We also really want this to be as safe of a space as possible for folks. So understand that everybody's sexual journey is really in a different place. There are no stupid questions, but please respect your co-participants in wherever their journey is at, and also in the fact that for some folks it's a little bit harder to come into this space than it is for others. So we just want to really make sure to respect each other's anonymity out in the world if you are to run into each other or whatever the case may be. So I think that I've said everything.
Yes,
you have to say.
that was
Okay.
great. That was wonderful. So I just want to do a few clarifying terms before we get started, because there's a lot of imagery out there in the world and in the media about BDSM and kink and all of these things. Often kinky people are like, oh, it's the GIMP, or it's associated with violence and serial killers, and or it's the punchline of a joke. And so I want to make sure that we can kind of dispel some of these things right off the bat and be on the same kind of vocabulary wavelength. So BDSM and kink. BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadism, and masochism, and the D and the S also stand for dominance and submission. All right, and that's like a lot of different things that is like this big umbrella term for everything like not kind of missionary, you know, vanilla sex. Vanilla, which you've already mentioned that term, is just this kind of like standard, run-of-the-mill, can be lovely, wonderful. I love vanilla sex. I also love kinky sex, right? You can have both vanilla and chocolate and swirls and nuts and all kinds of things, right? Some people, including myself, are just like, bondage, discipline, sadism, masochism, and dominance and submission. Well, that doesn't even include all the things I'm into. And it's like, great, let's just call it kink, okay? It's just like there's vanilla and there's kink. And so I really like the, just saying kink. But you can also say BDSM, and we kind of use it interchangeably. So what is the difference between BDSM or kink and abuse? You might have a situation where you have a person kneeling in front of you and you're slapping them across the face and spitting on them and telling them that they're worthless, right? How is that not abuse? Well, consent. Consent makes it not abuse, okay? This is something where within the BDSM community, within the kink community, consent is king or queen or master, I don't know. It is the top ruling thing. We negotiate, we communicate, we talk about these things beforehand. If someone's kneeling in front of you and you're spitting on them and calling them worthless, and you haven't talked about that ahead of time, you might be in the abuse range, right? But if you have talked about it and that person has the ability to tap out at any point and withdraw consent, then you're playing. And this is really what kink is. It's adults that continue to play and involve, now that we're adults, our sexuality. So you might have been involved in things as a child where, one person was getting tied up, or one person was the bad guy and the other person was the good guy, or whatever, and you're engaged in all kinds of role play. That's what pretend play is. And you can keep that going as an adult, but now you get dicks involved and like bondage and things like,
we
good bondage.
Over here too, if anyone wants to.
So, but let's talk about what consent is, because consent is a fluid term that even in the past couple of years has really changed. So consent is not the absence of no. Okay, this is not like, he never said no, so I just kept going. And so that was consent. This is not what consent is in vanilla sex or in kink sex. So you have to have an affirmative, like, yes, I want you to spit on me and call me worthless. It sounds really hot. It is also not coerced. It is not pressured consent, and it is not intoxicated consent. You're like, well, he said no, but once I got him drunk, then he was on his knees in a flash. It's like it doesn't work that way. we have to ahead of time talk about these things and get a good consent. It is informed consent. Anybody read 50 Shades or watch it? Okay, anybody? Okay, great, I'm glad. So something that happens in that book is that the dude is like, oh, sign this contract of all these things, all these kinky things that we want to do. And a contract is a reasonable thing to do. That it happens a lot in the kink community. It's a great way to communicate about what it is you're doing. And it's kind of, kinky in that, you're signing your life away, which of course your consent can be withdrawn at any point. So it's just a contract. But in this book, they do it in this way of like, she has no idea what she's getting into and then is expected to be held to this contract. And so that's uninformed consent. You can't consent to, spanking if you've never had a spanking. You know what I mean? So I know it sounds weird, but you have to ease into things, know what you're getting into, and then be like, yes, I like spanking, I want a hard spanking when this happens. So, you can consent, of course, to your first spanking, obviously. So you do that, you find out what it's about, and then you decide if that's something that you're going to participate in before you sign a contract. And then there are safe words. So a safe word is a way to withdraw consent within a scene. So in a scene, you might be doing some role playing where you saying, no, don't, please stop. All of that is super hot and within your role play, and that will not shut down your consent. But if you have established that periwinkle is your safe word, when you say periwinkle, you can slow things down, you can stop them. There's lots of ways to do safe words. You can do, many levels of safe words. You can do green, yellow, red. So, within a scene, you could just say green and not be breaking character, but it's this side note of I really enjoy what you're doing, let's go harder with that. It's a kind of out of character, but still in character way of talking. You can say yellow of let's slow it down, and then red being a hard stop. We need to pull back, get out of character, and really reassess this. And this is just something that whatever you're comfortable with, whatever words you want to use, you can do it in that way. You can also consent by, safe word by if you're bound and gagged, you could have your submissive holding a ball or an object, and if they drop it, then they have used their safe word. So you can come up with a lot of creative things. Sometimes I check in with people, I tell them ahead of time, if I squeeze your leg, I want you to squeeze me back to tell me that you're good, that things are going well. So you can come up with lots of different creative ways to communicate without breaking, your kind of character communication. Does that all make sense? You guys with me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so within the kink community, there's two kind of mantras that people like to use. The kind of more older school one is safe, sane, and consensual. You'll hear a lot. Notice consensual. Safe meaning let's not use implements that you have not, you don't feel confident in. Let's not hurt each other, in bad hurt. There's good hurt and there's bad hurt. Sane meaning let's not be in the middle of a fight. Let's not, be heavily intoxicated and things like that. And then of course consensual. Some other people like to use risk-aware consensual kink or RAC. And that is just basically trading out safe and sane for risk-aware. Because maybe some of the things that you're into wouldn't necessarily be described as safe or sane. And that's okay if you're risk-aware, some people, maybe you want to just give me a couple cuts or something. I don't know, whatever you're going to do. Risk-aware, consensual kink. We good? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so moving forward, we can just know it's all about consent. We're all adults, and within that, we can grow a rich kink life, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. All right, so as we're just building some more foundation, because this is a two-part class, and today's focus is really on how you identify power dynamics that are really interesting to you and have a lot of depth. And the next class is going to be a little bit more about really how to put those into practice and developing scenes. So let's talk a little bit about roles and power dynamics in play. So DS, and by that we mean like dominant and submissive roles within play. When you're watching a scene play out, what it may look like to you is that the dominant is totally in control, and that, you know, a whole bunch of things are happening to just happening to the submissive, right? And actually, it's really better to think about constructing your play in a way where it's a very even playing field. Because the submissive is the one who is determining the parameters of play. The person who is submissive within the scene gets to withdraw consent at any moment, really gets to shift the gears, because the role of the dominant is to be continuing to play in whatever way they want that their submissive continues to consent to, right? So negotiation is a big part of this, but also really figuring out, you know, how you embody either your dominant or your submissive role within your play is, if you can be really intentional about that, you're going to find that the depth of play that you can get into is much more vast, right? So we're going to get a little bit into like how you figure out your dom-sub styles, but let's, you know, how do you create dynamics where there really is mutual investment? And something that I think is really helpful to be thinking about, and we're going to do a couple of these charts throughout the class, is that there are a number of different things that intersect in sex and particularly in kink play, right? So you're bringing like your whole self over here, who is, you know, a very multifaceted person with many different identities. And you have your kink self, who might be very different than this other person, right? So thinking about how your sexuality, the role that you play within your play, or roles, we should just put that there, and then your personal identity. These are really great things to be breaking down for yourself. So like, are you a sub or are you a dom? Are you a switch? Are there other roles that we can think of that are relevant here to be when you're thinking about like kind of constructing your play?
Top, bottom.
Yep, top, bottom. Head. Mm-hmm.
A slave.
A little.
Daddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, keep them coming.
Master.
Owner.
Handler.
There you go.
Boss. Boss.
Mommy,
Sir.
mistress.
No.
Okay, daddy. Put daddy down.
There we go, daddy.
Yeah. So right, like when we're like talking about DS dynamic, like this could keep going, right? Like there's so many different ways to embody these things. All right, sexuality. Like we've got heads, we've got homo, we've got queer. What else do we have?
Pan.
Whoa. Pan. Okay. Was that? Is that?
That was like in stereo.
Okay. Pan. Okay. Anything else?
Bye.
Ace. Omni.
Demi.
Did we just cover? Oh yeah, you've got. Oh. Non. Yeah, poly.
Abstinent count as a.
I think we have asexual.
Yeah.
Abstinent, I guess would be different.
Wow.
Yeah, that is different,
Same.
right?
Yeah, no, that's
You're
different.
right.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of other identities as well. Okay, and then when we're thinking of identity, I mean, we can think about this in terms of like our whole identity, but also thinking about, you know, your identity as it relates to your sex and your play. You know, for me, like a big identity that comes into my play is my femme identity. You know, queer can also be, it can be a sexuality, but it can be an identity as well. What are some other identities that we think are relevant here?
Culture.
Cultural identity, for sure.
Some kind of religious.
Sure.
Your aesthetic.
Your
Say
body
degenerate?
It's a gender.
Oh, okay.
Do we want to give some gender identities? Mask.
Trans, non-binary.
Non-binary.
Fluid.
Gender fluid, yeah.
Mhm.
Trans,
How about lost?
Lost. Two spirits. So, as you're
Income can also be an identity.
class, for sure. So as you're thinking about, you know, how you want to be constructing your play, it's not only just helpful to think about like, ooh, that like secretary boss dynamic is really exciting, right? Like it is really exciting. But what does it mean for you? What does that bring up in terms of your personal identity that you exist in the world as, and your, you know, who you're attracted to and like to fuck, and the roles that you like to play in a scene, right? So once you start really kind of breaking down what all of these are for you, and then where they overlap, like this right here is the really juicy spot to play.
Sweet triangle.
Right? Like where you find all of the overlapping bits that really get you engaged and turned on and present in your play.
Is there something else I want to say?
Oh, and you know, I think also like as you start, we're gonna do a couple exercises, but as you're doing this, it can also be helpful to be putting down the things that you're like, oh, this used to be a role that I was super into, and it is not serving me anymore. And just making an acknowledgement of that can really also help to guide your play, because we are very evolving creatures, right? Like, we're taught about sex and sexuality as if you're supposed to just come pre-programmed, like, I know how to fuck, right? I know how to fuck in a way that makes me really hot. And that's just not how it works, right? Like, we evolve and we change. And so, like, certainly figure out the things that you're like, oh God, I never want to do that again, because that can help guide when you hit roadblocks of like, oh, what do I really want to be doing? Sometimes it can help to know, like, you know, where you came from and where you're headed.
All this stuff, it's like, I mean, when I was 20 and I started doming, I was like, you know, I had certain ideas like, okay, I have to wear this outfit and I need to do these things and I say these things. And I think it's a, it runs alongside how you are as a person. I was like, I'm a 20-year-old female, I'm gonna do this, this, and this, and I'm gonna dress like, you know, and then you like look at pictures of yourself, why was I wearing that? You know, especially, the late 90s, what? Such big pants, I didn't want to see my shoes. And then after a while, your sexuality runs alongside. It is part of you, and you start developing yourself as a person, and your sexuality develops also. And then now I'm 40, and I'm like, wait, what do I want to wear? And what is my what am I doing with my, and I feel almost like a new teenagerhood, which is very exciting for me. But that's, the whole thing that I'm trying to say is like, this might seem like, whoa, this is a lot to think about just for my sexuality. But your sexuality is such like a gift, and it's such a important part of your life, and if we really cultivate it and think about it and talk about it, we can have the best sexualities of, that we can cultivate, and it'll grow as we the more we put into it. So anyway, things to think about as far as like, there's all of these like, what does a dominant woman look like? What is a dominant man, or a submissive woman or man, or genderqueer? But there's like all of these different things of like stereotypes we can look at. But I'd like to start thinking about like icons rather than stereotypes. Like, so there's a secretary or boss, but who is it out there that you've seen in your life, celebrities or in stories that you've read or movies that you've seen, like that really embody a kind of like presence that you would like to exude, or that you admire, that you find very attractive? So we're just like trying to get our brains a little bit outside of the box. My two favorite ones, and I strive to be a mishmash of these two people, is Grace Jones and David Bowie are just, they're just so unexpected and beautiful and fierce and interesting and glamorous, like all at the same time. And that's like who, like, especially when I'm feeling very well in my dominance nowadays, like that's who I kind of want to be. Some other examples that we've been thinking about is like Beyonce is just has this like goddess kind of presence, and it is very like dominant, and just like behold, like here I am, which she deserves. And then somebody mentioned last time Ripley from Aliens, such a great like dominating force. Who else do we have? Oh yeah, you love.
Oh yeah, so for me, my icon is Cher in Mermaids, because she's just so no nonsense and femme at the same time. And so I really find like, actually probably all of her screen characters have that sass to them and that really rich femininity. And so that's like a really good touchstone for me in my play.
And I think Tyler Durden's kind of the dom that I would like in my life.
All
Sorry.
swagger,
all
and
just
all big dick
just
energy.
big dick and swinging around. Do you guys have any icons you want to throw out there? Anybody that inspires you? Yes.
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep.
Devil Wears Prada.
Yes. Devil Wears Prada Street.
Sarah
Very
Connor,
nice.
the Terminator.
Yes. Yes.
Is she Sarah with an H or not?
I think with an E.
I mean, yeah, let's give her a mark.
Why not?
I think
Dom
she
icons, yeah.
Rihanna.
Rihanna.
Yeah.
Where's everybody? That's it. Yeah.
Oprah. It's so funny. Who is it that teaches here that Oprah is their safe word?
That's the one I always throw. I usually throw Oprah out there. That's me. I just can't get my
Oh my god, okay. Who else?
Mother Teresa?
Oh.
As a dom? That would be
Wow.
interesting. But I love that. I love that because it's interesting.
She's gonna care for you to death?
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, that's a big part of being dominant also can be nurturing. You know?
Touch her. That
Yeah.
was a big thing. She'll touch the lepers when nobody else would.
Yeah. Brave and kind. And yeah, any other? The Rock.
The Rock.
I like The Rock.
Yeah.
Pink.
That's an exclamation point, actually.
Tom Hardy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Everything he does. Tom Hardy, he's Inception.
He's a British
Mad
actor.
Max.
He's amazing.
The second.
Oh.
Yeah, so wait, yeah, what's the name in Mad Max that she has? Furiosa. Furiosa. That's right. Yeah, so you can think of like who your kind of icons are, and then start kind of picking apart what is it about them that draws you to them as a dominant icon, and then how can you kind of utilize these things, you know? Like I would say for me, with Grace Jones, I mean, she just, like, she doesn't give a shit. You know what I mean? She's doing what she wants, and like when you see her in interviews, like from the 80s, and like dudes are being sexist and like racist and weird, and she's just like she doesn't have any of it, and she shuts that shit down, and she does what she wants, and she's just like androgynous and glamorous and fierce, you know. And I just like if she was gonna dominate me, I would be terrified and very turned on, and that's what I want to instill in people. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna, go through some worksheet stuff, but like as you're thinking about your icons, you can be thinking about the words that you would use to describe them, and like therefore that helps you figure out what you want to embody, or like what are they utilizing, or how are they carrying themselves, how do they speak, because it can be really helpful to have some touchstones, especially if you're trying to break out of routines, or you're just starting out, or you're trying to get new depths in your play. It can be very helpful to have some tools, to work with, some inspiration. And so then let's also talk a little bit about submissive icons, because for some of us, like we might really like getting into sub space in our play, but the way that our lives are structured in general is that we are positively reinforced for like doing it all, being type A, being successful, whatever the case may be. We have very stressful lives, and it can be hard to like get into a space where you're then like really willing and able to be vulnerable and giving power to somebody. And it's a lot of work, again, this idea of like when you watch a scene, you're like, oh, the Dom is doing all the work. It's actually a lot of work to be able to like give trust and give of yourself to somebody, when so much of what we are kind of positively reinforced for in capitalism in general is like being dominant and assertive, right? So some submissive icons that we really love. Sally from Nightmare Before Christmas. She kind of embodies that devotional style of submission. And she's very obedient and kind of longing. Like you can just kind of imagine her draping herself on Jack. Marilyn Monroe is also a really fun submissive embodiment, in the fact that she is completely irresistible. She absolutely uses her sex. She's like sex forward, right? But she's also kind of naughty and mischievous. Clark Kent is that real nerdy, service-oriented bottom, right? He's just constantly like getting overlooked.
But really, he's like a Superman.
Yes.
Like if you let it out, if you take his shirt off,
Yes.
he's Superman.
Yes. Harley Quinn from it's Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's Joker's girlfriend.
Yes, the Joker's girlfriend. Thank you. Super bratty, right? Like she is such a bossy bottom. She's just totally weird.
She'll fuck anybody up except for her dom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like you don't
Like a
have to
power
like
bottom.
a lot of people think of like if you're gonna be submissive in a scene, that means that you're just gonna lay down and take it, right? And absolutely not. Like you can be as difficult to top as you want to be, right? You just have to make sure you're negotiating it a little bit. Magic Mike, so the total exhibitionist pleaser, super sexy, but all in service to other people. And then I think Gomez Adams came out of our last class, and it's just so,
I love that one. What a
just such a
gentleman.
classic,
Adoring.
Yes, also very devoted, but like probably a little freakier than Sally.
Right? I don't know. Sally can take body parts out.
So what are some submissive icons that stand out to y'all?
John Oliver.
No, I just need to know why. I love that. Why do you think? Because
I don't see him being dominant. I see him totally being the nerd,
yes,
the sweet nerd, lovable nerd who'll probably do anything to please his woman.
yeah, he probably
He probably
stammers a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I love it.
Sweats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
starts telling you facts about me.
Yeah.
Someone on Facebook said Lucy.
Lucy, yes.
Which Lucy?
From Peanuts.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Submissive.
Or I love
Yeah, that's what
I love Lucy.
I love Lucy.
Yeah.
So many Lucy's. I
So
don't
many
know, they're
Lucy's.
good, they're
I'll
good
wait for
there.
her to respond.
Were you like Ricky? Love it. Who else?
I don't know, she was like, you got some splaining in it, like that's.
Well, but that's the thing, you know.
She's
you
maybe
can
a
give lot.
bossy bottom.
Bossy bottom.
Right.
She's not allowed to go to that audition.
That's right.
Jeff from Titanic.
Yep. I'll just stay in this water even though there's enough room on the raft. Yes, service, and I'll draw you.
Consensual.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's room.
I love Lucy's.
I love Lucy.
That's good.
Okay. Yeah, bossy bottom.
Roger Rabbit? Yes. You know what I like about that? Roger Rabbit is like because it's, as a dom, and to have somebody there going like, oh my god, looking like bakang, bakang, it's like very satisfying.
Anybody else?
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Took me forever to remember that.
AOC?
She's not dominant. She is submissive.
You think you can tell?
Listen to everything she says. Somebody's feeding her that crap. She doesn't have a
Oh,
brain in her
I
head to
actually am.
talk
I'm
about
not even gonna write her name down. I don't agree with you, but that's fine.
it. No, that's-
Someone can
You can have your own icon.
Anybody else?
Betty Boop.
Betty Boo.
Oh.
All right, great. Yeah, so, if you get stuck in kind of thinking about how to describe or work with a submissive embodiment that works for you, it can be really helpful to have your icon to go back to as inspiration for like, okay, wait. What am I aiming for here? But icons are different than stereotypes.
Yeah, so let's talk about the difference between icons and stereotypes. Icons are, people you're looking up to, kind of, iconify? I don't know. They are like the symbol for things that you admire. And it's about admiring and aspiring to, but not imitating, right? Stereotypes are more like cliches that are kind of thrusted upon people. It's like a cultural idea of people based on superficial things, right? So, I know as like a, straight female, I felt like I had a certain things that I needed to do as I was coming into my sexuality and coming into, being a dominant person or a kinky person. And over time, like, the strange thing that's happened is like I would be very dominant at work because I was a dom, and then I was just kind of confused about like in the bedroom in my personal life, like how to kind of go about things, and I had a lot of ideas in my head about like things that literally aroused me had to do with like the subjugation of women, and it would be like just like kind of grotesque in a way of like kind of the idea of being submissive, but in a kind of like super porny kind of abusive type of way. And I was always just like, well, that's what turns me on. What am I going to do? And then over time, what has happened is this whole thing is almost kind of reversed, where now that I'm a grown-ass woman, I'm like, a lot of the ideas have changed around where I'm like, oh, those things don't actually turn me on because I feel in my body, not that you can't have any of these fantasies. I'm not equating that like me growing up has shed these fantasies, but I do think that a lot of the stereotypes about what I was supposed to be kind of dissipated after a while, and I came into my own, and I'm like, oh, actually, it's a lot more complex than that, and a lot more interesting than what I was doing like when I was 20. Yes.
That's a quick question.
Yeah.
Just from your experience. So most of the time, obviously, kink is about, you have some kind of turned on feeling or some. Have you ever run into a person that their sexual orientation doesn't match with their kink in some way?
Their sexual orientation doesn't match with their kink.
Like, there's no turn on component, or there's like something. It's just it's misaligned. Usually, it is aligned.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting, I would have to ponder that, but I do think that sometimes it can look as though somebody's sexual orientation is not matching with their kink. Like when there's like forced bi, or a lot of like straight men who cross-dress. The part of why they're doing it is not, some things can appear to be a part of a different sexuality, but it's just like this more complex undercurrent of sexuality. So it's almost like the straight male wanting to cross-dress, part of it is like the humiliation of, and that totally has to do with like the straight gender dynamics, which, blows in that respect. And so it's humiliating to be looked at as female, but part of it also I think has to do with loving female sexuality in a way and wanting to embody it for those moments. And those two things kind of, I think, run together for a lot of the cross-dressers that I've worked with, played with.
There's also, we're going to touch on this a little bit at the end, where we're going to kind of go through how to bring fantasies to life. But I think when you start deconstructing your fantasies too, you'll find that there's a lot of different motivating factors around them. And sometimes the sex part of it is actually really deprioritized in your kink play versus the power dynamic, or the root somewhere in your sexual map that like created this idea or this interest or this enjoyment of a certain kind of sensation that actually is not related to the sex that you like to have, for sure.
And I would also say there's a thing, because, it's a spectrum, our sexualities, and but most of us were raised in our culture, though it's changing now. When we were kids, a lot of it was like, you're this or you're this, pick one, and a lot of times within kink, like, that fluidity can really come out, and it's just like, I have like a very masculine partner, and seeing him suck my dick is very exciting, and it has to do with that like masculinity and him like not being a gay man, but doing, and then I don't know, and then it just starts folding on top of each other, and you're like, this is so much fun. Anyway,
sometimes just the subversion is the kink, like it's just the being able to flip stuff.
Yeah, definitely. It's all what makes it interesting and juicy, and like we can get these like bigger, kind of more complex kinks going. So anyway, cliches, they can hold us back. The stereotypes, it can be like a form of social control and confinement. But we can also use those kinds of stereotypes and cliches in fun and interesting ways, rather than them using us. So there's a couple things we can do. We can play with them by, so let's say you have like a fear of being viewed as a slut, but you have a lot of slutty secret ambitions. Being a submissive that is, pushed towards doing slutty things, like, oh, no, you can fight the whole way and you still get the end result of what you want, right? Or you can flip that around, what I have, you can make it so if you're being a dominant and you have this kind of thing about like, I don't want this slut stereotype or whatever, as a dominant, you could make it so you're punishing your submissive for sexualizing you too much. Like this was a crux of like a lot of my play, where it just be like, in this like full like crazy regalia that's like very sexualized, and then punishing somebody for like looking at me in a sexual way, like, how dare you? Anyway, good times. But another thing you can do is turn stereotypes on their head. So imagine the secretary that dominates the boss, you know, fun. Imagine like the person, the burglar breaking into the house and then getting sex forced upon them, you know, and then they get tied up, you know. It can be like, you've seen that, really? Dang it, all my ideas have been taken. So yeah, what do I have? Like the boss gets a spanking from the secretary, or the secretary is totally belligerent and cursing out the boss during the spanking. You know, it's like all of these things. You can make little tweaks to the stereotypes, and you know, or even something that you've been playing for a long time. Take it and like just tweak it, because after a while we make stereotypes, you know, maybe for ourselves also, of like, I'm this kind of person and I will be that way forever, and then you're like, oh, I don't know where we're going with this anyway. Oh yeah, one of my personal favorite kind of flips is I really like being a jaded sex worker, because you're still like this, you're doing a job, you know, you're doing like the things that, you know, this person, you're consenting to it, you're doing the things that this person wants to do, but you kind of like, you know what, I've done this so many times, I know what I'm doing, I'm really good at my job, and I just gotta like, you know, get this thing going, you know, whatever. I just love being a jaded sex worker. What else?
What is it?
Huh?
A jaded sex worker.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean like of a sex worker that's like, I mean there's like that, it's that traditional kind of cliche of the prostitute or whatever. And so it's like, I just like taking that a little bit and making it so it's just kind of like more bitchy and dominant. But there's still this element of submission to it. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I don't mean like, oh, jaded sex workers. Like I was sex worker. I love sex workers. That's why I love playing it so much. So, and then let's talk about your kink life versus your own persona, right? So we have an idea of ourselves that you know, and there's different personas that you present to the world, like at work, when you're alone, when you're with your family, when you're with your partner, and things like that. And then your kink personas can kind of expand your world in certain ways, where you can be able to do things that you would not allow your personal self to do. So, you know, maybe, you know, your personal self doesn't, you know, get tied up, or would never do that, you know, or your personal self doesn't, you know, give like sloppy oral sex, or doesn't crawl across the floor, things like that. But your kink persona can do these things. And so you can kind of expand your repertoire. There's a lot of things that I'm not necessarily into unless I'm, you know, in a certain character. And you can have a collection of kink personas. You don't have to pick just one. I probably have like, I think I have 5 that have like names, you know, and they get these personal lives. And then if you're working with some, you know, you're partnered with somebody else that you're playing with a fair amount of time, you can also start, you know, drawing out these different characters, and they can all end up interacting with each other in different ways and have like this whole history behind them. You know, I've had like, you know, characters cheat on each other. You know, it's just like, what? How long have they been together? Well, I know the history. Sometimes my partner's like, okay, this is too much backstory. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about kind of like situational role play versus like lifestyle role play, and we're definitely going to get into like a lot of that stuff in the next class. But I think that when thinking about like constructing your personas, you know, for myself, I know like a personal process that I've gone through is really like, how does like these aspects of myself that are really integrated into my work life, into my role as a parent, into my friendships, right? Like, how do I carry those things into my kink play differently? So like, for me, one thing that carries over through all of them is femininity. But how I wield it is very different and intentional in the different spaces that I'm in, right? So if you get your worksheet out on the Dom Sub styles, we can kind of start talking through this in a little bit more specificity. So your icons are a really great way to start thinking of some of these descriptors, like how do you describe your dominant style? Are you more the quiet and menacing type? Are you loud and frightening? Are you playful and naughty? Are you quiet and controlling? Like, what are the things that really resonate with you? And also, like, what do you have to work with, right? Like, are you starting from a place where you're like, ooh, I'm needing to gain confidence as a Dom. So you may not start as loud and frightening Mary, but you might get there eventually, right? Or there might be a play partner who brings that out in you and you find yourself really like empowered when that comes out. Yeah.
I think we're missing a shirt.
Okay, yeah. The Dom Sub Styles one looks like this.
Yeah.
Are we needing some more of these?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Maybe I can get someone to make some photocopies.
I'll work on that.
Okay, great. Awesome. So the sheet's going to walk you through a lot of different tools that you have, and we're going to go through this both for dominant and submissive styles. But like for myself, right? Like if I know that femininity is a big part of my identity that I want to bring into my play, what are some tools that I have to work with? I have clothing for sure. I have props that can help me to manage my like fidgetiness, right? And get me grounded because I'm a hand talker. You have things like shoes that can make noise, or they can help you hold your posture in a certain way. There are things like corsets. I know for myself, clothing is a really big part of all of my play. Like it's intentional, I choose it for a reason. It helps me pace a scene, right? Because I now get to have control because I have your attention, right? I can use my tone of voice to set a certain tone. I might click around you with my heels to remind you that although they are very sexy, that I can use my point of my heel or my toe to inflict pain at any time. I can reward you for being a good sub by having nice things on underneath my clothing that get revealed to you for behaving, right? So what did I just do there? I just used a lot of different tools to capture your attention. And so what you want to think about is what are the tools that you have that work for you? Do you need to have big clunky boots that make you feel 10 feet tall? Then wear those. If they help you feel grounded and empowered, put those boots on and make your submissive lick them before they get any rewards, right? Is it you want to accentuate your masculinity in a scene? Then think about what are you going to wear if that's a part of your identity that you really want to bring into your scene. If you are like me and you know that you get fidgety and you need focus and direction, then use props and make noise to get yourself back on track. Your sub will think that you're being dominant and bossing them around, but really you're like, what the fuck was I about to do? I can't remember. Right? So it's like you can have those inside voices and your sub doesn't have to know at all, but you have to know what you need in the scene to be able to stay on track, right? Like a cheat that we talk about all the time are blindfolds or like you know, if you wear thigh highs, you can like take your thigh highs off to gag somebody with them or to blindfold somebody, or you can be wearing your pantyhose with no undies on and make sure that they get really nice and juicy and then stuff them in somebody's face. But like it can be helpful to have a blindfold in certain situations if you're like, oh, like I'm really comfortable with floggers, but this new one I kind of need to test out a little bit, and I didn't have time before the scene, so I'm going to just blindfold you. I'm going to make you wait for a little while. I'm going to practice my flogger out up against the wall. And now the experience that you're creating for your sub is that they have had to wait. They have lots of noise that they're hearing, that they're like, oh no, it's coming for me next, right? But you're just practicing. You're like, I didn't get a chance to use this flogger before I brought it here, so I'm gonna try it out right now, right? So like, the thing is to know what the things are that are gonna make you feel empowered. If it's speaking at a slow pace, because that helps to get you calm and grounded, do that. If it's hardly saying anything at all and just pointing and giving direction, and that's more empowering to you because you kind of slip up on your words, then use that to your effect. You can take anything that works for you and make it a tool of domination, right? You just have to know and be confident in what those things are. So your dominant icon is going to be really helpful for like giving you ideas around like, okay, what are some things that I can use or embody in my play? Like, how can I be working my hair or whatever? Like, whatever it is that you're working with, like, how can you use it to the best effect? And like, I'm just such a big proponent of costumes and props. Now, some people are like, I am my most dominant when I am fully naked. And the fact that I can still dominate you with no clothes on is just a sign of my ultimate power, right? And that's what gives them power and fuels them in a scene. But you just have to figure out what that is for you. Because for me, I'm definitely not going to start dominating you naked because I'm like, where are my tools? I need my tools, you know? So, and then also I think like language is a really helpful tool to be intentional about. Not only with your partner and how do you want to be referred to? How does your play partner want to be referred to? And making sure that you go into your scene using that kind of language, right? Because you might be in relationship with each other in other contexts. So what are ways that you can use language as the tool for setting the like fourth wall or whatever you want to call it for your scene? Of like, if you're honey and sweetie at home, you're not bringing that language into your play scene, right? Because now you're making that intimate connection that you have in another space. Find other language that you can use in your scenes. And also, you can use that, like especially in your dominant style, you can use your agreed upon terms and language as a way to like reset a tone in a scene as well. Like say your sub starts getting giggly or breaking character, right? Like you can be like, excuse me? Can I hear that again? I didn't hear mistress. Where is my mistress? Or using your language touchstones to come back to help refocus the scene. Or, I mean, that's such a common thing that can happen, right? Somebody laughs. Oh, you think this is funny? Huh? This is really funny to you? Oh, okay. And then maybe you shift your tone a little bit. If you're like, oh, I'm the loving and sensual dom, but then you want to like punctuate with some peaks of like meanness, like language and your tools can be really great ways to create those different dynamics in a scene. So thinking about language, how you're speaking, how you're holding your body, pacing, and what you're doing to create kind of the cadence of the scene, and then also like what action are you, like what are you interested in doing? Like what empowers you? Is it giving pleasure? Is it giving pain? Is it that you're a really skilled at needle play, or you know, you are really great with a whip and you want opportunities to show that off? Like what are the things that you're trying to get out of your scenes, and know that those are going to be, you don't have to necessarily script something out, but like what are going to be your touchstones that you go back to so that you can kind of recenter and gain control of a dynamic. What did I miss? Anything you want to add?
No, that was beautiful. I would just, first of all, every time you do that shirt thing, it's so effective. It's a great illustration. Everything goes so quiet. It's very nice. So
Just
yeah,
how I like it.
Yeah, you know what you did. No, the only thing I would say is at the very end of this, like if you fill out all of these different sections, and at the end we wrote a kind of sample of something that you could write out of, just like try just as an exercise writing out a few sentences about your persona based on what you've written there. And so I lost my copy, but there's a pretty funny one there. Not funny, lovely. It's lovely. Oh no, we don't have it. It's on the bottom of your sheet. We gave our do you guys have anything to add to it? It's okay. Oh, maybe I'll read it. Let's see. What does it say? Example, I'm a dominant who is assertive, seductive, and wants to be worshipped. I wear heels and red lipstick. I like to stand tall and look down at my subs while holding a crop. I like to give rewards, like the opportunity to touch me. I give orders softly and inflict pain sparingly. I plan out my scenes carefully with great detail. I excite my subs with a slow pacing and sporadic peaks of intensity. So, thank you very much. That is all based on, something that, all of the different parts that you filled out. So like, just a nice fluid paragraph about who you are in this persona based on all of these different parts of your persona. Tools for asserting dominance. Should we talk about subs?
You're getting a lot of fires on the emojis.
Excellent. Just how I like it.
And Mistress, may I retrieve your shirt for you?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you. Oh, you just are going above and beyond now. Oh, thank you.
It's the little things that make difference in a friendship. All right, tools for giving submission. And I like these ways of talking about it. It's like asserting dominance and giving submission. Okay, it's a gift. And there's lots of different types of submissives, like we've described with our icons. Some examples: quiet and sensual, obedient and helpful, bratty and loud. And so if you are going to be this dominant persona, it is very important to know what kind of submissive you're dealing with. Because how you would behave with the quiet and sensual submissive versus a bratty and loud submissive is going to be totally different. Bratty and loud submissive, I don't like them. But they're awesome. They're awesome for the right people. I'm always like, do what you're told. Anyway.
Except this is absolutely you.
Yes. See, okay, but that's the thing. I am the submissive I do not want. So it's great. It's fun to be bratty and loud. I just don't want to deal with it as a dom. Anyway, so clothing. What could you wear to make you feel vulnerable? To make you feel bratty? To make you feel these descriptive words? Do you guys want to throw out any other descriptive words? Like what kind of subs do we have going on here? Yes. Quiet and shy? We have a shy one?
Giggly?
Sorry.
I can't.
Freaky and giggly.
I can't do it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Shy.
She's a Sam, so she's really devoted, but there's times where she will be obnoxious until she gets attention.
Oh.
Oh,
Very nice.
okay.
Devoted,
Obnoxious.
but seeking attention. We all get a little obnoxious when we're looking for attention.
Bratty, no, was it freaky and disobedient?
Freaky and disobedient. Any other ones?
I don't know the word for it, but the tester to see if you push the buttons to
Oh,
see
a
if,
boundary
pusher.
pusher.
Yeah. See how dominant they actually are.
Yeah. Is that as hard as you can hit?
All you got? Innocent and virginal?
Innocent and good, yep.
Pure.
Pure, yeah.
Any other kind of subs we have out there? Service, yeah. Serve me something to do.
Something else like
Oh, a peen slut?
Is that a description?
A masochist?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we haven't totally talked about is some people don't want to have a persona, and that being a masochist can be a persona. But masochism on its own is just the love of the sensation of pain and feeling like a sexual pleasure out of from pain, or when you're aroused, pain feels very good to you. And some people are like, I just want a dom that's gonna beat my ass the right way, or whatever it is. I'm like, I don't need this, like, yes, mistress, whatever. Just please kick my ass. So there's that whole thing too. Like a dom could just be totally action oriented, and the same with the sub is just receiving implements and sensation. So that's a whole thing too. And on the other end of it, you can also have, you don't have to be spanking or slapping or having any kind of pain in these situations. It could be all role play and personas and things like that, and domination. Clothing. What makes you guys feel submissive?
Lack of clothing.
A total lack of clothing. Does it for most people? Yes. A collar.
Leash.
Yes, a collar can be a great symbol. I brought up 3 different collars, partly to show the variation. Of course, I brought 3 black ones, but there's other colors. But there can be, I mean, there's as many collars as personalities, and there's great designers coming out with new ones all the time. It's important to find, if you're into collars, a collar that suits you. It's a great tool in a, maybe you have a relationship that, you're not always in a sexual DS relationship. You might be like taking the kids to school and then, going to work and then coming home. And it's like a collar can be a really wonderful symbolic way. Now we are playing, now we are stepping into this room where we are kinky people and we do kinky things. And it's a great, just feeling the presence on your neck can put you into a submissive place after a busy day or whatever you might have going on. Yes?
Well, I found this a switch. When I'm a dom, I'm feeling I'm very specific on what I wear, and I have very big choices. But as a sub, you put me in a collar or any sort of leash, and instantly I don't need anything else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
A harness.
A harness?
Folds.
Yes.
Bruises.
Yep.
I'm not sure
Tucked
if it
around.
counts, but I like being dressed. So like if the person says, okay, these are your 3 options and I get to pick, or they just
Yep.
say you're wearing this now.
Yes. That's a really great point.
Clothing,
It is,
you have no choice.
it is lovely. Yeah, a uniform can be great. It's lovely as a submissive to be, be like, you choose. I'm here for you. Like you pick it out, or tell me what to wear. Or as a submissive, maybe you're picking out something that your dom will really enjoy seeing you in.
Especially when it's impractical.
Yes, impractical things. That's always fun. Ridiculous heels and things, or whatever. Or to spend a lot of time getting ready. Getting ready for me is a level of foreplay. It's like I don't ever wear lipstick, so when my character puts on lipstick, I'm like, oh, watch out. And my friends are like, whoa, something's going on. I embrace myself.
A mask.
A mask, yes.
Like another mask.
And you know what? And that's the thing too. Like I brought out a blindfold, but also masks. I have a submissive friend where he is very, very shy, and but the moment he puts on a mask or a hood, he can do anything. He gets superhuman. we used to make him do all kinds of like dances and stuff, and he would blow my mind. Like we were trying to humiliate him, like, all right, we made him do like the to dance to Fame, and he had one of these masks on that was like a clear mask that had makeup on it, but because his face was obscured, he did the most incredible Fame like routine, like while singing Fame. I'm gonna live forever. I don't know if you guys remember, but it's really because he was able. Covering your face can often help you get into that persona. So the blindfold is really wonderful for the dom that maybe is feeling a little unsure of themselves, and it is really great for a submissive that might have trouble getting into it. Especially like your partner, you deal with them all day, and then to all of a sudden see them as like a dominant person who has control. Sometimes you need a little thing to like click you into it and get you in the mood. Yeah.
I found a lot of times with dressing noises help, so like chains clinking or anything.
Right. No, and you can bell people. Do we still have we used to have nibble clamps that have bells on them? Stuff like that. Yeah, maybe nibble clamps as an outfit. I'm just telling you. So in body language, as a submissive, what kind of body language are you going to exude? So, and that's going to be very different for a brat versus, a service-oriented slave. So how are you going to stand? Are you standing at all? Maybe you don't ever get off the ground, keeping your eyes down, things like that. How are you going to go about that sort of thing? Communication is involved with your body language also. Like, a lot of times as a dom, it depends totally on who I'm playing with, but often it would be like, keep your eyes down. You don't deserve to look me in the eye and stuff like that. And maybe your tone is going to be softer. Or if you're a little or something, maybe you're going to pitch your voice up. Or, if you're going to be bratty and you're going to, get into your whole mode that way. And then language, what words are you going to use to show your devotion or your submission? Calling, your dominant by their proper dominant name, or, I don't know, you can say, using proper names, madam, sir, whatever it's going to be. And then the actions, what are you going to do? And this can be, I just love thinking about this, because once you find, you key into what kind of submissive you want to be, or dominant, or whatever it's going to be, and then you start thinking about, what am I going to do? And you're on the right track when that flame starts getting, my flame comes straight from here. When the flame starts letting, the gas gets turned up and your fire starts going, you're like, all right, I'm going down the right path. So if you're sitting there thinking about all right, when she wakes up, I'm gonna draw a bath, and I already got my rose, or whatever you're gonna do, and we're gonna have mimosas, and I'm gonna sit out and I'm gonna wash her whole body. And if that lights up your flame, you're on the right track. You're keying into something. Does that all make sense? You guys want to plug anything in there? Burning questions? And so on this one, we also wrote out, can I borrow some of these pages? Thank you. Let's see. I'm a sub who is mouthy and bratty. I think that was this one. I like to wear street clothes with crotchless underwear. Yeah, this is crotchless underwear or lingerie is a nice surprise for my dom. I keep my eyes down when my dom is looking, but I like to look at them when they turn away. I pretend to be coy, but really I'm quite lusty. I keep my voice low and only speak if spoken to. I can be reluctant. This doesn't fit right. I'm mixing up all of my sub. I can be reluctant to comply with my dom, which can get me in trouble. I don't like doing chores unless they're sexual. That's my little joke. Anywho.
And then we've got switching, right? It's real. It happens. There are switches out there. So, if you find that you enjoy both giving power and sort of holding power in scenes or in dynamics, some things that you can do, because it can get, the two side, your dom and your sub side can kind of get enmeshed. So think about how much you want them to be in response to each other, right? So some things that you can be thinking about is what are the dynamics, the situations, and the partners that you are really excited about dominating or bottoming in, right? And like, this can be everything, and this is like a great place also to be going back to those like roles and identities and stuff. Like, you might be like, I will only sub to feminine people. I am not going to sub to masculine people because that doesn't do good things for my soul. Or vice versa, right? Or there might be certain dynamics where you're like, I will dom in public, but I will not sub in public at all. So think about like where your comfort level with both is. I will have sex in a scene if I am subbing, but I will not have sex at all if I'm doming, or whatever. You know, like, these are the good questions to be asking yourself. Like, what kind of partners do you want to be doming with? What kind of partners do you want to be subbing to, right? Like, Mary's sub style, like, drives her crazy to dominate, right? Whereas, like, you might be someone who's like, I like subbing because I like embodying this perfect sub that I love to dominate, right? And that might be a way that you get to kind of play with both. So thinking about how that all works for you, and then what the different, you know, factors are for you within your roles, within your identity, within your sexuality, that you get to explore with both. I personally believe that we're all a little switchy, but I'm told that I might be wrong on this.
I agree.
But that is my personal philosophy, is that we've all got a little bit of switch in us. We just maybe haven't identified some of the areas where we feel more dominant or more submissive. And then, you know, also thinking about what are the things that are on the menu for both. So, like, if being dominant is really about giving pleasure, say, for you, like, that's something that you really enjoy doing, but like when you're subbing, maybe you really want a whole lot of pain. You know, figure out, like, okay, if I want to give pleasure, one, you need to find partners that are also looking for that. But you need to be thinking about ways that maybe you have not experienced in your sub dynamics, that you're going to be able to do that. And it's going to affect your dom style, right? Because if giving pleasure is something that you really love to do, and you're like, oh, I've never really considered mommy play before, like, maybe that's a great avenue for you to be exploring, because that style of sub is going to want a lot of care and caressing and things like that. So once you can kind of identify what you're interested in and like what the root of your dom or sub style is, it's also going to help inform how you're going to play, who you're going to play with, and so forth. So, you know, for some folks, switching is really just about like, in this set of circumstances with these types of partners and with this kind of play, I can be dominant. And in this other set of circumstances with these partners, I can be submissive. For some people, it's going to be, I can be both dominant and submissive with this one partner. And then there's like a lot of different kinds of like negotiation that happens there between the two of you on how you can clearly define those roles. And then there's a third category, which is switching within a scene. It's a little bit more complicated to do, but you absolutely can, as long as you pre-negotiate it. So the only thing you really want to avoid is like not having the moment or the catalyst that decides when things switch, right? Because then you can be kind of doing the power play forever. Like, you don't want to be going into a scene where like, I'm playing with a bratty sub who has it in her mind that she's gonna be dom by the end of the scene, and I'm like fighting against that the whole scene because I'm like, no, but I'm dominant. Like, I'm not going to submit to you, right? You have to have some form of negotiation ahead of time that there can be a switch in the dynamic. Otherwise, you're going to be working at odds with each other. Like, I mean, and sometimes with play partners that you've been with for a long time, it can obviously flow really organically if you both kind of have that switchy quality. And then for some people, it's also just going to be like the only way that you can ever sub is by knowing like it's safe for you to do that if by the end of the scene you're going to like regain power, or possibly even vice versa. So those kinds of things can inform the types of negotiations and the communication that you have with your partner, right? It's like, oh, I know that you really want me to sub for you. Here's a way that I can do that. If we can be in a scenario where, like, you know, once you bend me over and you're spanking me, I'm the secretary who's had enough and I'm quitting my job and I'm like, you know what? I've hated you all these years. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. And then you bend your partner over and you're spanking them, right? Because that can be like a fun way to work around potentially some blocks that you might have to giving power to that person. And it might help you actually expand that repertoire if that's something that the two of you are really interested in playing in, right? So those are some different ways to think about switching, and certainly I encourage you to fill out both your Dom and your sub style worksheets if like that's what you're wanting to do with a partner, and like compare notes. And you know, sometimes also it can be like a really fun act of service to give to your sub of like, okay, you want to be in service to me? Well, here's what we're gonna do. I like to be dominated in this way. These are the things that really turn me on in that context, and you're going to do that for me, right? And so then you can even go into the scene knowing that you are the Dom who gave the direction, who gave them the clothing to wear, who gave them the action, but you're like getting them to embody some dominance within the scene to kind of meet some of your needs around that too.
To an experience that, you know, like you said in class, oh hey, like submissives, a lot of people think they're like, yes sir, yes ma'am, but like I've been in scenarios where it's, you know, saying get on your knees and do X, or I've also been in a scenario where it's like take off your pants because I'm picking up on a vibe of like this is how I'm going to serve them. And that looks like Domly or whatever, but it can, the actions can kind of switch.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally.
Yeah, it can get really fluid of like who is servicing who.
Yeah.
You know, and anyway, I won't get into too many personal examples. but yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's like
Let me tell you about my sex life. So, but yeah, like you know, somebody can be. It's like it goes back to that like sex worker thing of like, am I in charge or am I servicing? Mm-hmm. And you can do kind of both at the same time, and then the other person is kind of doing both at the same time. But it's just, I don't know, it's just so delicious. Like there's just so many avenues to go down. It's like you have all these Netflix shows and there's like all these seasons and you just like, you can just gobble them up. If you find the right one, you know, I'm like gonna do so many kinky possibilities once you hit on like the sweet spot of it. And in order to do that, you have to communicate and negotiate. So I'd like to talk about that. Because who you're playing with is, of course, very important. So you can know your own Dom style or your submissive style, but of course you could actually fill these out as the Dom that you're looking for or the sub that you're looking for. And no one will fit into it perfectly. But that's where communication and negotiation comes in. Sex and kinky stuff is stuff that we are not supposed to talk about. It can be very uncomfortable to talk about, but I implore you to please try if you have not already, because opening up and talking about your sexuality with your partners and getting into the details of it does not take away from spontaneity. It creates spontaneity. It creates very interesting situations that would have never come up otherwise. You don't talk about this stuff, like the most spontaneous thing you can do is like show up with flowers or something instead of the puppy outfit that you wanted to show up in. Okay? Or you show up in the puppy outfit and that's a real gamble. Okay, so just talk about it beforehand. I like to mention this study all the time. There's a social science study or whatever of children. Don't worry, I'm going to bring it back. It was children on playgrounds. When their caretakers, like for schools or whatever, take them to playgrounds that have no fences, the kids would play close to the center of the playground and close to their caretakers. The places that had fences, the kids would fan out and play up all the way up to the fences. Okay, knowing the boundaries creates a sexuality playground bigger than if you don't know the boundaries. Okay? So talk to your partners about the boundaries. Know where the fences are. Play up to the fence. Maybe sometimes you can hop over the fence and then come back before anybody notices. Smoke a couple cigarettes. Whatever you're going to do. Nobody smokes anymore. Okay, so what this allows you to do, when you get into detail in communication negotiation, it allows you to explore your fantasies and your partner's fantasies. If you've ever been involved in a creative process where you're like, I have this amazing idea, and then you have a wonderful collaborator that's like, man, what if we did this? And you're like, oh my God, this would never be as cool if we hadn't talked about it and gotten together on this. So that's what it can be like. It's wonderful. So the first thing you need to do to properly communicate your sexuality. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is communication and negotiation can be super hot also. Because you're talking about like things that turn you on and that you're about to do. It can be a form of foreplay. So you can view it in that context also. All right, so the first thing you need to do is assess your own needs, desires, and limits. And those are 3 different things. What do you need out of the situation? Are there certain things that if you don't have it, it's kind of, you don't want to do it at all? Are there desires which are similar to needs, but you don't need the desires, you would like those things to happen? And your limits. Like I have a hard limit around like face slapping. I love to slap other people's faces. Don't get me wrong. But if my face gets slapped, the whole thing gets shut down and, I'm going to be off for a while. All right, so then you have to share it with your partner. And hopefully they've assessed their own needs and everything. Share it with your partner and get specific. Do you guys have yes, no, maybe lists? You might have yes, no, maybe. Yes, that is a fun way. You guys should have the kinky ones. But that's me holding that dick, by the way. Just so you know, I was very pregnant at the time. They were like, put on this latex. Anyway, it's a great job. It's a great place to work. So the great thing about the yes, no, maybe list is you can do it and your partner fills it out. You put all of the things on the list into a yes, no, or maybe category. And then when you get together with your partner and you go over the list, then you can discuss each thing, like how do you feel about spanking? I love spanking, I put that in the yes. What does that mean? We have to get specific with it now once you're discussing it. Who's doing the spanking? Are you receiving the spanking or are you giving the spanking? And what kind of spanking? Is this like a really hard spanking? Is this an over the knee spanking? Does this like involve like a whole role play or a lead up, or is it, this or that? You just want your butt touched? What's going on? So get really specific about it. And then also do not expect that everything's going to line up. And a little bit later, Sarah and I are going to do a sample negotiation which will help you. It's not only that you don't expect it all to line up, it's that you can work with the things that may not line up. So maybe you really are into like a voyeuristic type of thing, but you're with a partner that is not an exhibitionist. Maybe there's certain circumstances under which you could get that voyeuristic feeling without making your partner uncomfortable. And you can discuss that and explore it. And it's a fun collaboration. It's not about saying like, you can't do this. I mean, you do say that, but it's about what you can do and how you can work together to make a situation where you're both very into it. And great. So I wanted to, before I get into aftercare and decompression, I want to talk about the negotiation worksheets that you have. So when I was a dom, we would have, we had one room that was dedicated just to interviews. So like I worked in a house that had many people working there. And people would walk in, you'd have a walk-in appointment, or you know, you could make a regular appointment. So they'd walk in, we'd do an interview, and there's certain things that you would always hit on. So it would be someone I just met, and we would talk for about 5 minutes and then go and play for about an hour and have a great time, because I would go through all of these things and find out the details of the play, right? So first of all, who are you? Not you personally. Who are you like in this kink environment? Who is your persona, you know? So are you dominant, submissive, switch, and describe your kink persona. What are you into and how intensely? So maybe you're gonna say, I'm really into spanking and I like it hard, all right? And I like it with no warm up, and I wanna be over your knee, and I want my hair pulled, and I want you to be really mean mommy. Okay, great, I get it. No, just kidding. All right, how do I just put it? Okay, what are your limits and safe words? So where are the fences on this playground, and what word would you like to use to, you know, say I need things to slow down or stop entirely? And what would you like to do today? So that's different from what are you into, right? Because maybe today you don't want such a hard spanking or whatever. And you can also kind of describe what are you in today of like, what kind of scenario are we looking for, which is separate from what are you into. And then how long would you like to play for? A 30-minute kind of scenario is totally different how you're gonna gauge it from a weekend, right? So a weekend you might like, you know, let's go to Palm Springs or whatever, and I'm just gonna fuck you up all weekend. You're gonna take a lot of time, you're gonna be eating meals, you're gonna leave them around, you know, tied up to something for while they watch a show. You know, it's totally separate from like if you have 30 minutes, I'm like, all right, let's get down to it, right? And then what kind of aftercare and decompression? What are you gonna do afterwards? A lot of people use the word aftercare. A friend of mine likes to use the word decompression, which I really enjoy. It depends on what you need afterwards. So are you the kind of sub that, you know, wants your dom to rub the arnica on your butt and put peas on there, and you want to be held? Do you want a text and some flowers the next day? Do you want to just talk about it over breakfast and talk about, you know, the different things? Decompression is a really great thing. So how are you going to care for each other afterwards? Because things can get intense. And then are you going to talk about it? Set aside some time to be like, you know, here's what really worked. I really love this. Compliment sandwiches are great, especially with doms, where you're like, oh, I loved it when you pulled my hair, when you spit right into my mouth. I was less into that, but then you slapped me across the face and it brought me right back into it. And they're like, wow, I did a great job and I won't spit next time. You know? So talk about it afterwards in that level of communication. If you're going to play with the person again, the decompression is great because and then it feeds back into the communication again. And then the more you guys know about each other, then a lot of the negotiation, the pre-negotiation stuff starts falling off and you're like, I had this idea, and you guys kind of just can form things that way also if you have a regular partner. But this works really wonderfully for, you know, partners that you're just meeting for the first time as well. There's also different levels of negotiation sheets that you can have. Like I was at a play party recently where they had, it was a birthday party for a submissive, and they wanted certain people to play with them and to know all of their limits and what they're into. And so they had filled out a whole form of here's the things that I'm into, here are my limits, here are the people that, you know, can play at this level and at this, like, pre-approved, and we all got that sheet ahead of time and we knew what we were walking in. So then it was just an entire evening where different people were playing with them, and they were just like, we were moving through the whole thing very seamlessly, and it was lovely. Okay, so that's another level of like pre-negotiation you could work out. You can even do things like over text, like how hard you want to be spanked tonight. Oh shit, I'm at work and I am aroused, you know, real hard. Thank you for asking. Anyway, it can be fun and sexy to negotiate and talk about these things.
I know you mentioned contracts. How about like doming someone you don't know but met online? Like, what's the safety on that? Like, in order.
So you
like,
meet them in person, or you're never meeting them in person?
Yeah, you're gonna meet them in person, but that day you agree to dom them, so that's the day you'll meet them. Like,
Yeah.
how do you basically watch your back that nothing happens after, like saying like that person saying that you abused them, or saying that like how do you someone who's like you're introducing them to kink, like how can you watch your back?
Well, I would say that you'd probably have a lot of documentation from your online interactions, first of all. But I mean, there's always a risk with this. Where I would say, in general, not to go super heavy with people that you've just met. But I mean, some people want it. I've definitely played really heavy with people that I've just met, and it's kind of a crapshoot in a way. I've never had an issue with. A lot of people don't want to admit that they got hurt through kink. You know, it's like, so I don't know. It's you just never know. I mean, it's the same thing with, I mean, any sort of interaction, especially, you know, within sexuality, could turn in a weird way. So, but I don't know. I've played with so many people, and I've never had anybody come back about it. But you're going to talk about all those things ahead of time, and if somebody's interacting with you on that level online, and then you meet them, I don't know.
So you don't need to go out extra and get a contract. And
no, the contracts are not about. The contract is just a kind of form of kinky negotiation, or a way of binding. It's a lot like, it's a verbal representation of like a collar, you know, of like, under these circumstances, this is how we play, or I own you because of this, or this is, you know, you're agreeing to allow me to do all of these things. And it is not a real contract. It's just for fun. Yeah, it's all for fun, even though it might look really dark here. Yeah.
So just having those red receipts online should be enough if something does happen.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, that would be a way of showing like, this was, you know, a consensual thing. And then also that they have a word to withdraw consent.
Right.
I mean, make sure that they know that. So, yeah. And use your safe words as subs. It can be hard at times to be feeling very submissive and then to tell your dom that you want to stop. But it is entirely, you know, of course, your right. And any dom that tells you that you can't stop something is not playing, you know, then that gets into like abuse territory. So, anyway.
On that note, let's go into, this is going to be our last exercise. And as I'm talking through it, I want you all to be thinking about, you do have little slips of paper on your chair, and you are going to write a fantasy down. And it's totally anonymous. But you're going to give us some fodder for our negotiation. So when you're thinking about, you know, we've gone through a lot of stuff, right? Like your dominant and your submissive icons, your identity and the roles, and your sexuality and how they all intersect, right? Well, then you get into the actual things that you want to explore, or the things that you've really thought about, and that have been, like, are the things that, like, ignite that fire, right? And I think that just like really getting rooted in the embodiment of your dominance or your submission, it is great to spend some time with your fantasies as well. Because if you can figure out what the root of a fantasy is, one, it's going to help you be more informed in your negotiations. Two, it's going to give you great workarounds if you hit a wall in negotiating with your partner, or you find like you guys are not into the exact same things, right? So if you know where a fantasy is rooted in your sexuality, then it gives you lots of different ways to explore that fantasy, even if it's not the like, 7-step process, perfect, sun setting moment on a yacht with Tom Hardy, right? So thinking about a lot of our fantasies involve some sort of sex act, a power dynamic, and some desires that got ignited somewhere. This can be like an early childhood moment where you got the first peek at your sexuality. This can be a really hot sex scene that you saw. This can be walking down the street and you see somebody walk by and you're just all of a sudden consumed by their thighs and your like face is in there and you're biting them and you're just like, whoa, I just had this whole scenario play out because this person just completely turned my brain on or whatever. So if you can be thinking about in your dynamics that you're excited about creating, what is the motivation behind that dynamic? Is it the sensation of the thing? Like, do you want to feel your face buried in those thighs because it's gonna feel good? Or do you want somebody's thighs squeezing against your head because you want them to have total control over you and kind of force you into submission? And then that's a power dynamic, right? Or is it that there is just, those shorts were the shorts that your first date wore when you were 17 years old and you're wanting to create that fire and that spark of youth, right? So, let's use an example. So, we've talked a little bit about littles earlier, right? So maybe your fantasy is that you're really turned on by an older, let's say, femme-presenting person. Maybe you're a student or a child to this person, and they force you to have sex with them. So there's a lot of things going on in that dynamic, right? Like you've got the power dynamic of somebody being older. You have potentially the no, yeah, but yes in your mind, that total giving over of control that maybe is the thing that's appealing to you. Or maybe you just had a teacher when you were young who you just thought was so hot, and the older woman teacher dynamic has forever and always stuck with you, right? If you can know what the things are about that dynamic that are exciting to you, if I then come to you and you're like, I want you to be my teacher and I want you to force me to have sex with you, and I'm like, first of all, I am not that old. I do not want to be your teacher. That rubs up against my stuff or whatever. But I can give you a dynamic where I'm very dominant of you, and maybe we can play with that power dynamic to still give you that thing. Or if I'm like, I am really not into any kind of forced sex scenes, I cannot do that in my dominant style. So let's figure out, how can we work around giving you that feeling? Could we take it in a slightly different direction where I'm very caring and doting, and I still tie you up, and we then have rough sex, and I take all power away from you, but I'm never forcing you to have sex, right? So this is how you can then figure out how you get to this ultimate fantasy dynamic that you want to create, but in a way that both people are really bought into. So, your pieces of paper. Let's write down some fantasies.
A little sleepy. You're getting close to my best.
It's 9:40-ish.
Okay, great.
Special. 9:45.
Great.
Okay, so like 1 more minute to write your fantasies down.
We're doing, where we gonna take? Or we can go on one? Cause that'd be like mesh 2 fantasies. Oh, let's make this work.
Yeah. Let's see what comes up.
Okay.
Okay, start wrapping it up, and you're gonna crumple, like don't fold your piece of paper in some really nice way, like crumple it
Crumple
in
it
a
up.
ball
Roll it up.
so that it's easy to throw. Crumple, 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 finish writing. Okay, you got a couple more writers. I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay, every piece of paper crumpled up, and then close your eyes, and you're gonna just chuck them, just throw them everywhere. Just throw them. Okay. Come up and get fantasies. Who wants, who wrote one over here? I'm gonna give you.
You want a fantasy?
Love a fantasy.
Fantasy? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'll take one.
Oh, sorry.
He needs a fantasy.
Who needs a fantasy? You want a fantasy?
Who caught it? Who else
I
needs
will so take my fantasy.
Try to grab it out of the air.
I have another fantasy here. More fantasy.
I thought mine was too.
All right, now,
Okay, who's
now
got a
you
good
have
one?
to act it out.
Yeah.
All right, let's read some fantasies.
Does anyone have a good one to read?
Oh, okay, the space alien and the experiment. Learning how these humans tick, probing their sex parts. I like that, sex parts. Because it's, that's like what the aliens call it, I think. That's great.
That person's already there.
Yeah, no, they're in it. They're like, I've thought about this. Anybody got a good one? Yeah, what?
A mixture of abduction and fear play, helplessness and lost control.
Love it. I like hopelessness. You know what arouses me is hopelessness. It is though, right? Humans are complicated. Right? All right. Anybody else got a good one? What do you have? What do you have? Go for it.
This one's like my fantasy is that I am rough playing with someone, like wrestling. Things turn physical and they overpower me to have sex.
Nice.
Yeah, wrestling.
Oh,
Always
wrestling.
really good.
Yeah.
Good
Human
one.
furniture?
Oh yeah.
Human furniture.
Very nice. Very nice. You're nothing but a table.
I'm looking for my throne.
Yeah, right? There's those what is it? OK Cupid billboards that are everywhere.
Yes,
The
yes.
GP.
So good.
And the one like finish my novel, and she's like sitting on the hands, and I was like, oh, that is pinky. You be my chair while I finish my novel. Thanks, OK Cupid. I found my match.
I think it's more like eHarmony commitment now.
Yeah, right. All right.
Any other good ones?
I'm tied to a bed, spread eagle, and teased denied orgasm for a while.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, orgasm
Nice.
denial.
Yep.
It's a
Love
good
it.
one.
A goddess I adore for a long time. There's a chance that I could be alone with her, and I force her to be my slave and force orgasms and anal play.
Nice.
Oh,
I think I
specific.
I was thinking that today. Did I? Okay. Anything else good? Yeah.
Sex with dad bod poetry teacher who was dumb at first and I named him a son.
Dad bod.
Dad bod poetry teacher.
That's like a specific. That's so specific. You know what I mean? That's like what you were talking about, like exactly with the teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, which one should we negotiate?
Yeah. What do you guys want us to negotiate?
Dad bod, poetry teacher, who you turn into a sub?
Yeah.
Okay. Should we mix it with anything? Should we mash it up?
Space alien?
And then, like, force Dad bod to slay the eagle. Like, they are the goddess that you've been worshiping forever.
How about this?
And you want them spread out.
How about, let's say you really want to do dad bod, and I really want to do space alien. Okay? And let's negotiate that.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Sarah. What are you feeling into tonight?
Okay, so I've had this like long, I think it's probably from college, of just like worshiping my poetry teacher who's kind of masculine but also super dad, like jokes, dad bod, like and you know, in this fantasy, like he is really dominant in the class. Like he has this kind of like, maybe it's a little bit of my daddy stuff that you know about. But ultimately, once like I get him in the bedroom, I take total control and make him recite poetry to me.
Well done.
All right. No, that sounds great. That sounds great. I was thinking of like maybe like you could be an alien, and then I would be abducted and have my sex parts coached.
Okay, wait. I think I might be able to see it. So, okay. Can we still have a scenario where, can I come to one of your classes?
Of
So
course.
you're presenting,
Uh-huh.
okay? And I'm just so, I come and I talk to you after the class.
Uh-huh.
And I'm really doting about your teaching style. I'm just totally playing to your ego.
Right, which I love.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And like totally playing up your toppiness and all of that.
Okay.
And then somehow though you have to ask me out because I want to be kind of submissive in this I want a little bit of a teacher-student dynamic going.
I mean, if you really build me up, that should work.
Okay, I think I can do that. Okay, I think I know the buttons to press. Okay, but then once we get home, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to do this, but I can end up being an alien. Who just has decided that you're going to be my specimen.
Yeah, no, I love that because it's like, to me, like the teacher thing, like, yeah, I like it, but I just need like something weird. You know, like real weird, and I just want it to be like really foreign, and I have no idea what's gonna happen and stuff. And I think that works because I can really, you know what? I'm gonna wear that tweed suit that you love. Okay, when I'm teaching blowjobs and beyond.
Yes.
And I'll wear those briefs, and then we'll build me up. We'll flirt. We'll get a drink.
Okay.
And then I'll think I am getting laid tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to my place because like this is going to be a little complicated. So I need some pre-set up time. But in the car ride and when we're getting drinks, the thing that I really need is for you to be pretentious.
Okay.
I need you to be like a know-it-all. I need you to kind of talk to me like I'm stupid.
Yeah.
So that the whole time I can be building up my master plan that like I actually get to totally take full control and like, you know, maybe remove your inside parts.
I love it.
For study.
There's the inside parts, there's the sex parts.
Yeah.
No, I love it because no, I think I could be a real dick about it. And then the idea of just knowing that I have no idea what's gonna. Could you do like pepper in like some weird alien things like where you just say words a little
Like I
weird, like
slip up.
sex parts instead of dick.
Oh, but that would be fun too because you're a teacher. And I mean, you're a sex
and I
teacher.
could correct
but like,
you.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right. So we'll see you guys later. Okay.
But so like that was, I wasn't quite sure how we were gonna get there.
We got there. We got there good. I'm excited about this.
It was like I really needed a certain dynamic to be present of like the domination piece, and Mary also needed that in like a really different way. So like, how do you figure out how? I mean, actually, that's a real switchy scene.
Yeah, no, we're total switches.
Very, very switchy. But what's fun is that neither of us like shut the other person down, right? Like we didn't give up the things that we wanted. It wasn't like anyone was a doormat, but it also wasn't like, oh, you want me to be an alien and like explore your sex parts? Like what's wrong with you, right? Like it's like having enthusiasm about that thing that's gonna be really exciting for her. Now, if you can't get there, obviously hold your boundaries and, you know, Mary and I are maybe like know each other really well and can flow, but like thinking about how can you get creative, because ultimately that's what this is, right? Is it's play. And so try to have fun with it while also like being able to work with like what your partner is asking for and needing to be able to get into that space that ultimately you're both wanting to get to.
I really appreciate the fact that despite there was no dad bod like, available to you to use, you were able to get, like still continue on that.
That's good. Dad bod is a mindset.
Yeah, I mean, because things aren't going to come in the package, right, that they exist in our fantasies. And your fantasy world isn't going to overlap 100% with anybody. That's just never going to happen. So you have to find those places where you can discover the overlap and work from there, because chances are that you have a lot more to work with than like if you're not holding on to like, I need that one really, really specific thing, right? Any questions?
That was great.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna be here for one-on-one questions or anything else you guys want to talk about. Thank you guys so much for coming out.
Yeah.
And we have a second part to this where we'll discuss like actually executing your plans. Or
Yeah, so on July 10th, we do the second part to this class. So it can be really fun, like if you're available and you want to come, fill out your Dom Sub sheets and come kind of prepared with that info, because we'll actually be able to workshop some real stuff in terms of like how to build scenes and work with some of those Dom Sub styles that you all are going to come with. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming out.